your perspective and why you care about these issues is really what they need to hear and what is most important for you to be able to say. So I'll be talking about the first two and then turn it over to our colleague Rebecca Rear to talk about the second two issues. The first bill that we want to talk about is called the Transportation Climate Alignment Act. This bill, communities across the state face transportation challenges, whether it's high traffic and the pollution that accompanies vehicle emissions or lack of access to public transit infrastructure. As the state faces a significant budget shortfall for the second straight year, it is essential that every transportation dollar is spent in a way that best meets the needs of the communities impacted by the projects. The Transportation Climate Alignment Act of 2026 ensures that community impacts are considered in the planning of major transportation projects. So for major highway expansion projects over $100 million, Maryland Department of Transportation must offset pollution with cleaner transportation options, including public transit, bike paths, pedestrian infrastructures, and prioritize investments in overburdened and underserved communities. These mitigation measures make the projects better, more responsive to community needs, and reduce our state's greenhouse gas emissions. I live in Baltimore City, and so I would talk about how bike lanes have improved the life of my neighborhood and how pedestrian access is so important to me and my community. These are the things that I would talk about if as a constituent talking to my legislator. And so think about as you're over the next couple of days, as you're getting ready for these meetings, think about how does transportation projects affect your life for good or for bad? And how could this bill make your life better? Public transportation, pedestrian infrastructure, bike lanes, or other mitigation efforts that this bill would support. So the second bill we're wanting to talk about doesn't have a clever name like the Transportation Climate Alignment Act, but it safeguards the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. Now, this gets a little bit wonky, but stay with us. So Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund, otherwise known as the SEIF, is our single largest non-taxpayer generated source of revenue, specifically targeted towards advancing climate pollution reduction and supporting low-income, overburdened, and underserved Marylanders. These SEIF funds have increased since 2021 and mirror the need for investment to meet our climate goals and protect Maryland families from ballooning energy bills. These are the bills. This is the fund that supports energy assistance. It supports community solar projects. It supports energy efficiency projects. It requires so many of the things that reduce our energy bills and improve our lives through renewable energy and climate pollution reduction. In 2025, the Maryland General Assembly raided more than $300 million from the SEIF to balance shortfalls in the general fund. And this year, the governor's budget diverts nearly another $300 million for that same purpose. We want to make sure that this money is spent for its intended purposes, for renewable energy, for pollution reduction, for things that reduce our energy bills, using supporting clean and renewable energy projects. Our bill mandates that at least $365 million be spent on the intended programs, which guarantees at least level funding for clean energy and climate reduction programs for the next 4 years. And at least 40% of that spending would support lower and moderate income households and overburdened and underserved communities. So again, these are the details of a bill, but really what they need to hear is how this matters to us. I live in a house that needs energy efficiency. I'd like to have a heat pump. I want to install a heat pump to reduce the pollution from the gas stove, from my fired power furnace. Wouldn't it be, and I also subscribe to community solar, which is how I can participate in renewable energy projects. These are both projects and programs that are supported by the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and why we need to make sure that this money is available for Marylanders to do the same. Now, for that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Climate Policy and Justice, Rebecca Rear, who will round out our list of priority bills.
Thanks so much, Kristen, and the rest of the team for tonight's presentation. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you on Monday. So I'm going to round us out with starting with the Cherish Our Communities Act, which is we love our acronyms and alphabet soup here in Annapolis. So Cherish is actually an acronym that stands for From Cumulative Harms to Environmental Restoration for Improving Our Shared Health. You will not be quizzed on that on Monday, but the Cherish Our Communities Act is an environmental justice and cumulative impacts bill that really seeks to address communities that experience multiple sources of pollution nearby where they live. I do this practice mostly in person. I know we're virtual, but bear with me. Everybody take a deep breath. And I don't do that as a way to begin a meditation this evening, although I encourage you afterwards to take a mental health break. But I do it because when we breathe in together, we recognize that we aren't breathing in just one thing at a time. And yet our regulatory agencies like the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Public Service Commission, what they do is they regulate one pollutant or one facility at a time. And what the Cherish Our Communities Act really seeks to do is to change the way that agencies like the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Public Service Commission permit facilities. So you take in what's going on in that community. You take in what else you might be breathing in, what else you might be drinking, what else you might be experiencing before issuing that additional permit or renewing an existing permit. That's what the Cherish Our Communities Act is all about, because we know I'm about to show a map that shows, and I know, we often use Baltimore as an example of a place that is overburdened and underserved, but there are other places throughout Maryland that experience high levels of pollution and a lack of access to opportunity. And this is a screenshot of a map that was created to show where there's just one type of permit, this Part 7D. It's an air pollution type of permit from the Department of the Environment. And you can see around Hagerstown how many of those permits, just that one type of air pollution permit, are issued. And this is what happens. Industry ends up clustering around the state, and the people living nearby experience all of that pollution that's coming from these specific permit types. So if one of these facilities, comes in and asks to renew their permit, or a new facility comes in and asks for a new permit, none of what's going on in the community is considered. So only what that facility would contribute is being considered. And so what the Cherish Our Communities Act does is say, whoa, hold on. Before you issue that additional permit, let's see what else is going on. And as a public health professional, how I talk about this bill when I'm telling my story about this is we know that the cumulative burdens of that pollution really affects people and the way on health outcomes. So in these same areas where we see this concentration of pollution, we also see high asthma hospitalizations and high rates of cardiovascular disease. And so this bill seeks to address that through a framework of cumulative impacts and environmental justice in the way that we make that we issue permits, and that the way people experience pollution and harm. And we're not the first state by far to do this. Other states like Minnesota, New Jersey, New York have already done this. New Jersey is a great example we always point to, because their bill not only passed, but their regulations were also upheld in court recently. So we're in a good position this year to pass this bill to bring important environmental justice, permit modernization to Maryland. So that's Cherish Our Communities Act. And then we have our final priority, which is more of a framework and a campaign called Power Maryland Forward. And what we're asking legislators about this session, we know, quite frankly, energy bills are too high. Everybody in the state of Maryland is feeling the crunch around their electricity bills and how expensive it has gotten. And so Power Maryland Forward seeks to address and support everybody here in energy affordability through defending against more fossil fuels, which are very expensive, and volatile. Deploying more solar and storage, which is the fastest, cheapest, and cleanest source of energy out there. Increase accountability and transparency for utilities, and getting the most out of the electricity grid that we have, that we all rely on to power our homes and businesses. What does that mean for session? Well, there are specific bills that correspond with those principles, including more solar. We're going to add one or two more on here once the bills, we get those numbers. But there's the Affordable Solar Act, and that we have the bill numbers up here for reference, and you'll have that in your packet for lobby night on Monday. But we have more solar. We have opportunities to increase accountability. And there's a bill this session that is going to cap the amount of supervisor salaries, supervisor pay that we as ratepayers would pay for. And then we also are getting more out of the grid that we have through advanced transmission technologies, which is a fancy way of saying instead of building a new transmission line, let's use the technologies that we have to make the transmission lines that we have work better. We have new technologies. We have ways to do things like reconductor and add battery storage in order to increase transmission on our grid before we build new transmission lines. And then we also have a bill on data center demand response and also incentivizing bringing your own energy and further incentivizing clean energy for data center demand, those large load users that are putting such a high demand on the grid that we as ratepayers are all paying for. This one, you all have lots to talk about when you tell your story. There is no legislator who is not hearing from their constituents right now on the electricity bills. What they may not be hearing is directly face to face from their constituents that clean energy is an important part of the affordability solution, and that pairing solar and storage with smart grid technologies and putting some guardrails against large load users is a package of solutions that really makes sense for Marylanders. So that is a really important message that you're going to bring forward on Monday. And we're excited to answer any questions or provide more details on how we can help the messaging on that one. And so with that really runs through our legislative priorities and hopefully gives you a sense of how to take the big themes we've been talking about to build a healthy environment for everyone in Maryland, to bring that home on these specific issues during the legislative session, and how you can be an effective advocate on Monday with your legislators. We always say they work for you. And so you're their boss, so tell them what you need.